One of the biggest stories around today, and I woke up to this one this morning, quite shocking. A 48-hour boycott of Twitter by some users protesting at the platform's alleged lack of action on anti-Semitism has begun. It was triggered, as you will know because we've debated it extensively on the radio station today, by the actions of grime music artist Wiley, who shared a number of posts, unsavoury ones at that, on Twitter on Friday. Some of the tweets were deleted, but Twitter was criticised for taking time to act and actually leaving some of the tweets up. Now, I have to say, I did not see them when they appeared, and I was not personally aware of how long they were up for. But, even if they were up for 2 seconds, it was 2 seconds too long. So, who is more to blame for this major infraction? Wiley himself for posting such things, or the medium that he was using for allowing that to happen, and allowing for that to happen for longer than it should. It's a complicated story. Let's try and untangle it with Stephen Silverman, Director of Investigations and Enforcement at Campaign Against Antisemitism. Stephen, thank you for coming on. What do you make of this, first of all? What do you make of this situation as it stands tonight?
Good evening. Look, this appalling situation has thrown up two parallel issues, both of which need to be treated separately. Firstly, there is no doubt that Wiley committed a serious offence, an incitement offence under the Public Order Act of 1986. Justice would be served by his being prosecuted for that.
Well, of course, the police are looking into that at the moment, I understand.
They are indeed. Now, what you have, and I think the things he said have been well rehearsed now, but what you have is a popular celebrity broadcasting to an audience of almost 500,000, many of whom were almost certainly impressionable young people, the same lies about and hatred of Jews that have previously led to persecution on a massive scale. So, this is incredibly serious, and you can understand why the Jewish community is so upset and nervous about this.
You can, and it startles that some people think that way, because, I thought, in the world that I've been brought up in, I thought we fought a war about all of this. I thought that matter was resolved when we dealt with the little man with the moustache.
The shock of the Holocaust pushed anti-Semitism underground for a long time. And I think many people made the mistake of believing that it had actually gone away, that the virus had been cured, but it hadn't. Because like all good viruses, it works out how to mutate and appear in a new form. And a number of events over the last 5 years or so have enabled it to resurface with a vengeance. Now, one of those, the conditions that have prevailed, is Twitter and other social media companies allowing anti-Semitism to run riot across its platform, seemingly because it's commercially expedient for it to do so. So Holocaust denial, anti-Semitic conspiracy theories about Jewish power and control, Jews being responsible for pornography and paedophilia, anything that's depraved. You don't have to dig very deep to find it in abundance on Twitter. Now, when the Black Lives Matter protests began a few weeks ago, Twitter stated publicly that it had to do better. Yet it doesn't seem to feel the same obligation when it comes to Jewish people. If you just look at what's happened within the last few weeks, it has refused to take action against the anti-Semitic hashtag #JewishPrivilege, which is in itself a conspiracy theory. It began blocking people who had in their profiles a picture of the Star of David, which, until Campaign Against Antisemitism intervened, Twitter had decided to designate a hateful symbol. And now we have their shameful inaction against Wiley. And you have to ask, if Wiley were not a popular celebrity with 500,000 Twitter followers, would he still have an account?
And I have to say that, they said, of course, we took these down fairly rapidly, but I think it's widely agreed that it isn't rapidly enough.
And they can ban. Have you personally been? They can ban.
Have you
Twitter
been in touch with Twitter? Sorry.
They can ban Twitter. I mean, didn't they do that with Katie Hopkins recently?
Indeed.
So they can just shut the account down permanently.
Why shouldn't they be doing that? Now, I watched this unfold, this whole saga unfolding in real time, and don't forget, it continued into the next morning when he was posting videos on Instagram demanding that Jews crawl out from under their rocks and put their top Jewish man up to talk to him, whoever that is. So yes, they can do it, and those tweets were available for most of the day. And it was only after an incredible amount of pressure and uproar, not just from the Jewish community, but by its countless allies who were also outraged by this, that Twitter, started just to delete tweets and suspended him for however long it was,
12 hours.
12 hours, which is just ridiculous. Anybody else would have had their account cancelled there and then.
Now, this man also has received an honour. Do you believe that he should have that removed?
Well, we have written to the relevant cabinet committee asking them to remove that, to take away that MBE. It seems highly appropriate that someone who holds those views, let alone expressing them in such a prolonged and intense public rant, should be able to hold that honour.
And why
the problem isn't it that people feel that they can, at any time of the day, tweet out or put on social media, float out in different ways, anything they want? It doesn't seem to have dawned on some people in this day and age, and maybe, I don't know what you think, we might need laws to make them aware of this, that whoever they are, whether they are a senior politician, whether they're an entertainment figure, or whether they're somebody who has a market stall, you have to be very circumspect about what you publish. You cannot just plumb the depths of your mind and whatever might be in it and just simply let rip. That's not the way that it works. So that's part of the difficulty here, isn't it?
Well, excuse me. Well, it is. I mean, the Online Harms Act has become even more important now, and the government really needs to treat this as a matter of priority. But a number of things have happened over the last couple of years that have actually enabled this. I mean, Twitter and Facebook and the other social networks have provided the platform, the cauldron within which all this can be brewed up and disseminated. But there's a reason why the climate exists in which it's possible. And that takes us into a number of other areas. One is that the taboo of anti-Semitism has been lessened by what we've seen in politics over the last 5 years. Also, we have seen that the Crown Prosecution Service has an appalling record in prosecuting anti-Semitic hate speech on social media. And by appalling, I mean, and I'll give you an example, somebody who we sought to have prosecuted for tweeting that Jews were lying, murdering bastards and that he would applaud if they all died tomorrow, he was not prosecuted. And when we asked why, we actually got a letter back saying he was just trying to start a debate, and there's no evidence that he actually incited anybody. Now,
what on earth kind of debate could that be?
Well, exactly. So these are the reasons why these things are happening.
But why is it not treated as seriously as other racism? Anti-Semitism seems to, I mean, like you say, with the last Labour, well, not government, but the last Labour opposition party, Jeremy Corbyn, he didn't do too badly, even though he lost a lot of seats. A lot of people did vote for him. So is it treated different to other forms of racism, and why?
One of the reasons I think that we have this situation is that whereas most forms of racism are seen as oppressing somebody who is weaker and more disadvantaged, anti-Semitism relies entirely on the absolutely ludicrous conspiracy theories that Jews are powerful and wealthy and hold all the aces, and therefore you're punching up at someone who is oppressing you. And for as long as this is allowed to persist, it's going to be very hard to persuade people to treat this in a different way. And you know what? And I kind of feel bad about bringing this up on this program, but there is a double standard with anti-Semitism, whereby it is not treated as seriously as other forms of racism, as you've pointed out. And I hope you'll forgive me for pointing out that even your own station isn't immune to it. I listened to an interview on Saturday about the Wiley incident, and at the end of it, the host invited listeners to phone in and let her know if maybe Wiley had a point.
Well, I have no knowledge of that at all, Stephen, so I cannot comment.
Well, it wasn't you. It was, I know, but, the recording's there on your catch-up service. And, can you imagine that question being asked if Wiley's comments had been made about any other minority?
Well, indeed, but the biggest issue, not the bigger, the biggest issue, is how do we deal with this? Law is one thing, and assiduously enforcing law and assiduously making sure that social media companies comply with that law. That's one thing. But the worrying thing about this is the attitudes that lead to such postings. There's clearly some kind of problem and deviation in the way that some people think. And it was never part of my upbringing, so that's why I'm so shocked by it. I wonder how that happened.
I just think I think a number of things happen. We have seen historically that anti-Semitism resurfaces after when there have been long periods of political instability, when there have been long periods of economic hardship, and where people are struggling to find reasons beyond the obvious for the problems they're experiencing, and some are prone to fall back on the oldest scapegoat in the world, which is the Jewish people. It's been like this for a couple of thousand years. And we've had a climate, as I've already said, both politically and in the criminal justice system, which has kind of allowed that to be nurtured and to happen without any fear of any real repercussions. It is going to be an occasional process. The damage done over the last 5 years by what has gone on in politics is going to take a very, very, very long time to unwind.
Just finally and quickly, Stephen, this 48-hour boycott of Twitter by some users in protest, do you think that that's going to have any great effect?
Well, we hope so. I mean, there will need to be ongoing action, and we are looking closely at other things that will take place. But with a very short space of time, this became the sole preserve of a few people in the UK to something that was being picked up around the world. So, hopefully it will have an impact. But if it doesn't, we're prepared to take further action as appropriate.
Okay, which would be?
Well, that's under discussion at the moment.
Okay. Stephen, thank you for that. Stephen Silverman, Director of Investigations and Enforcement at Campaign Against Antisemitism.